The neural interface crackled against Commander Kelrin Voss's skull as he stared at the marriage contract floating in holographic blue before him. Death was preferable to this humiliation, but death wouldn't save the Terran colonies from the hegemony's expansion fleet, now massing at the edge of human space. The Altarian Council requires a formal union. Admiral Rockstain's voice cut through the sterile air of the diplomatic chamber. Captain Lirelei Nixthara commands their most advanced dreadnought. Marry her, and her fleet joins our defense. Refuse, and Earth burns within the cycle. Kelrin's jaw tightened. At 34, he'd carved his reputation from asteroid fields and plasma storms, not political maneuvering. His tactical brilliance had earned him command of humanity's newest battlecruiser. The Defiant Echo, but brilliance meant nothing against the hegemony's million-ship armada. The chamber doors hissed open, and she entered. Captain Lirelei moved like liquid starlight, her Altarian heritage evident in the subtle ridge of scales along her temples and the way. Her silver-gold hair seemed to catch light that wasn't there. Her uniform bore honors from a dozen campaigns, and her eyes, those unsettling violet eyes, held the cold calculation of someone who'd watched worlds die. Commander Voss, her voice carried the musical undertones of her species, but no warmth. I trust you understand the necessity of our arrangement. I understand survival, Kelrin replied, studying her. Altarians were known for their prescient abilities, their uncanny knack for navigation through both space and politics. This woman commanded not just ships, but the loyalty of the entire Altarian fleet, Titan dreadnoughts that could tip the balance of the coming war. She gestured toward the contract. My terms are simple. You receive access to Altarian navigation data and fleet support. I receive Terran citizenship and protection from certain political complications in my own space. Kelrin noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. What complications? That is not your concern. But it was his concern now. The moment he signed this contract, her problems became his problems. He thought of the intelligence reports. Hegemony scouts had been spotted near the Centauri colonies. Families, children, entire civilizations hung in the balance. The marriage will be ceremonial only, Lirelei continued. We maintain separate quarters, separate commands. When the war ends, we dissolve the union. Clean, simple. Nothing about this felt clean or simple. Kelrin had spent his life trusting his instincts, and every instinct screamed that Captain Nixthara was far more than she appeared. The way she held herself suggested coiled power, and there was something in her gaze, a flicker of calculation, that went beyond mere tactical thinking. Duration? He asked. Until the hegemony threat is neutralized. Command structure. Independent. Your ship, my fleet. We coordinate, not subordinate. Kelrin reached for the stylus. The weight of humanity's future pressed against his shoulders as he signed his name in flowing script. Lirelei signed with fluid grace, her Altarian characters seeming to dance across the holographic surface. It is done, she said, and something in her tone suggested finality beyond mere paperwork. As the contract dissolved into data streams, Kelrin found himself studying his new wife's profile. She was dangerous, that much was obvious. But dangerous in what way remained to be seen. The war horn's mournful cry echoed through the station's corridors, signaling the approach of hegemony advanced scouts. Their marriage of convenience was about to be tested by fire. The Defiant Echo shuddered as hegemony plasma torpedoes erupted against her shields. On the tactical display, the enemy formation stretched across 3/6 Testa, probe force of 40 ships, testing the defenses of the Kepler station. Their pattern recognition is adapting faster than our countermeasures, reported Lieutenant Commander Ferrix from the sensor station. They're learning our firing sequences. Kelrin gripped his command chair as another salvo rattled the bridge. Through the view screen, he could see Lirelei's flagship, the Whisper of Tides, cutting through the enemy formation like a knife through flesh. Her Altarian dreadnoughts moved with an almost supernatural coordination, their weapons finding gaps in hegemony defenses that shouldn't have existed. "Sir, Captain Nixtera is requesting a private channel," Communications Officer Velith announced. Kelrin's jaw tightened. 3 weeks of marriage, and they'd barely spoken beyond tactical necessity. On screen, Liralay's image materialized beside his command chair, her violet eyes intense. "Your ship is taking unnecessary damage, Commander. You're fighting them. Like humans. We are humans. And that predictability will get you killed." She gestured toward her tactical display. "The hegemony's strength lies in their computational warfare. They calculate probabilities and exploit patterns. You need to think like water, not stone, meaning flow around their expectations. Watch." On the shared tactical feed, her dreadnoughts suddenly broke formation, scattering in what appeared to be complete chaos. The hegemony ships adjusted their targeting, trying to capitalize on the apparent disorder. But as they did, Kelrin began to see the pattern, or rather, the deliberate lack of one dot. Each Altarian ship moved according to no discernible logic. Yet somehow, they were exactly where they needed to be when hegemony fire arrived at empty space. It was like watching dancers who had never rehearsed together perform a perfect ballet. Your navigation computers, Kelrin realized. They're not just plotting courses, they're predicting the enemy's predictions. Altarian prescience isn't magic, Commander. It's mathematics applied to probability cascades that your species can't perceive. But your tactical instincts. She paused, studying something on her displays. They complement our calculations in ways I didn't expect. A massive hegemony cruiser broke through the defensive line, heading straight for Kepler Station. Its massive form bristled with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. "I can see where it needs to be stopped," Liralay said, her voice taking on an odd, distant quality. "But my ships can't reach the optimal firing position in time." Kelrin studied the tactical display, his mind racing. The cruiser's trajectory, the asteroid field to port, the debris from earlier skirmishes. They can if we give them a clear lane. The debris field is too dense, not if we detonate it. Kelrin turned to his weapons officer. "Target the largest debris cluster with everything we have. Full spread, maximum yield." "Sir, that will put us directly in the cruiser's firing arc." "Do it." The defiant Echo unleashed her full arsenal into the debris field. The explosion was spectacular, a brief, new star that vaporized tons of twisted metal and created a clear corridor straight to the hegemony cruiser's flank. Liralay's ships flowed through the gap like mercury, their combined fire crippling the enemy vessel in seconds. Ingenious Liralay's voice carried a note of something that might have been admiration. "I saw the need, but not the method. And I saw the method, but not the positioning." Kelrin found himself almost smiling. "We make an effective team." "Yes," she said, and there was something in her tone that hadn't been there before. "We do." The remaining hegemony ships withdrew, their probe complete. But as Kelrin watched the tactical display clear, he realized something had changed between him and his wife. The careful distance they'd maintained was beginning to crack, and that, he suspected, was far more dangerous than any enemy fleet. The joint tactical session had stretched past the third watch, and Kelrin found himself alone with Liralay in the strategic planning chamber aboard Kepler Station. Holographic star charts surrounded them, showing hegemony fleet movements across 17 sectors. "They're not just probing anymore," Liralay said, her finger tracing enemy advancement vectors. "This is systematic. They're mapping our response patterns." Kelrin leaned closer to study the display, acutely aware of her presence. Over the past month, their tactical coordination had evolved into something that bordered on telepathic understanding. She could anticipate his strategies before he fully formed them, while he somehow knew exactly where her ships needed to be. Here, he pointed to a cluster of red dots near the Vega system. They're building towards something. This isn't random expansion, agreed. But the pattern. She paused, her eyes taking on that distant look that meant her prescient abilities were engaging. There's something else. Something they're not showing us. What do you mean? Lirelei was quiet for a long moment, her hand moving unconsciously to touch a pendant at her throat, a piece of Altarian crystal that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. My people's gift isn't prophecy, Kelrin. It's pattern recognition. Across temporal probability cascades, we see the most likely outcomes based on current trajectories. It was the first time she'd used his given name. The sound of it, in her musical voice, sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. And what do you see? Darkness. A choice that will define not just this war, but the future of both our species. She turned to face him fully, and he was struck by the depth of worry in her violet eyes. The hegemony isn't just trying to conquer human space. They're trying to eliminate the concept of individuality itself. What? Their society is built on collective consciousness, every citizen linked in a neural network. To them, independence is a disease. They've been watching humanity for decades, studying our capacity for individual initiative, creative problem-solving, chaotic thinking, and now they've seen what happens when human unpredictability combines with Altarian prescience. The implications hit Kelrin like a plasma bolt. We're not just a threat to their expansion. We're a threat to their entire worldview. Worse, we're proof that their way isn't the only way to achieve coordination and power. If word spreads that individual minds, working in harmony, can match or exceed their collective approach. She gestured toward the tactical displays. They'll come with everything they have. How long do we have? Based on their current positioning and build-up patterns, 6 weeks, maybe 7. Kelrin slumped into his chair. Against their full battle fleet, we need the entire Terran Defense Force, plus every allied ship we can muster. The Terran Defense Force won't be enough, even with full Altarian support. Lirelei moved closer, her expression intense. But there might be another way. Tell me. The hegemony's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. Their collective consciousness requires vast neural networks to maintain cohesion across interstellar distances. They have central processing nodes, living ships that coordinate entire fleets. If we could take out those nodes, the individual ships would lose coordination. They'd revert to basic programming, easy to predict and counter. She paused, her hand tightening on her pendant. But reaching those nodes would require getting through the core of their battle formation. It would be a suicide run, unless, Kelrin said slowly, we had a way to navigate through their defenses without following predictable patterns. Exactly. Your instinctive tactical thinking could find paths that even their collective intelligence can't anticipate. Well, our prescience ensures we're in the right position to exploit whatever opening you create. They stared at each other across the holographic battlefield, both understanding what she was really saying. This wasn't just about military cooperation anymore. Success would require a level of trust and coordination that went far beyond their marriage of convenience. There's something else, Lirelei said quietly. Something I haven't told you about why I needed this marriage. Kelrin waited. I'm not just any Altarian captain. I'm heir to the navigation, thrown-out species' most advanced prescient. My arranged marriage to an Altarian noble would have bound our fleet to a policy of non-interference. My people were going to let humanity face the hegemony alone, and you couldn't accept that. I've seen what happens if humanity falls. The darkness spreads. Within a generation, the hegemony assimilates the entire galaxy. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I committed treason to be here, Kelrin. If we fail, I can never go home. The weight of her sacrifice settled between them like a living thing. This woman had given up everything, her throne, her people, her future, to stand beside humanity in its darkest hour. Then we won't fail, he said simply. Something shifted in her expression, and for the first time since their marriage, she smiled. The War Council convened in the main briefing amphitheater of Kepler Station, with representatives from every major human colony and allied species. Admiral Rockstein presided over the holographic assembly, but Kelrin could feel the weight of attention focused on him and Lirelei as they presented their intelligence. The hegemony's main battle fleet consists of over 3,000 vessels, Lirelei announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Our combined forces number less than 400. Murmurs of dismay rippled through the assembled commanders. Representative Corvain from the Centauri colonies leaned forward. Captain Nixthera, surely your prescient abilities suggest some alternative strategy. They do. Lirelei gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show the hegemony fleet's formation. Their coordination depends on 12-node vessels, living ships that serve as neural networks for their collective consciousness. Destroy those nodes, and their numerical advantage becomes irrelevant. Easier said than done, growled Admiral Chen from the Mars Defense Fleet. Those nodes will be buried deep in their formation, protected by layers of ships. Kelrin stepped forward, which is why we're not going to fight through their formation. We're going around it. Explain. The hegemony thinks in terms of probability and optimization. They'll position their defenses based on the most logical attack vectors. The approaches that offer the best tactical advantages, the clearest lines of fire, the strongest defensive positions. Kelrin manipulated the display, highlighting seemingly random trajectories through the enemy formation. But what if we don't take the logical approach? You're talking about suicide runs through their heaviest concentrations, Admiral Chen objected. I'm talking about paths they won't expect because they don't make tactical sense. Unless you have perfect coordination and prescient navigation. Kelrin looked at Lirelei. Paths that would be suicide for anyone else. Representative Corvain frowned. You're asking us to bet the fate of human civilization on the coordination between you and Captain Nick. Yes, Kelrin said simply, because it's the only chance we have. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, there was no alternative. The hegemony fleet was too large, too well coordinated for conventional tactics. Their only hope lay in the unprecedented partnership between human intuition and Altarian prescience. As the council dispersed to prepare their fleets, Lirelei fell into step beside Kelrin. There's something I need to show you, she said quietly. She led him to her private quarters aboard the Whisper of Tides. The space was unlike anything on human ships. Walls that seemed to flow like water, furniture that shifted shape according to need, and everywhere the soft blue-green glow of Altarian bioluminescent technology. My people believe that consciousness shapes reality at the quantum level, she said, moving to what appeared to be an altar in the center of the room. Our prescience works by feeling the resonances between possible futures and present choices. The altar held a crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light, the same material as her pendant, but larger and infinitely more complex. Within its faceted depths, Kelrin could see patterns that seemed to shift and dance. This is a nexus crystal, Lirelei explained. It amplifies the connection between paired consciousness. My people use them to coordinate fleet movements across impossible distances. And you want us to use it? I want us to bond with it. She turned to face him, her expression serious. Kelrin, what we're attempting requires more than just coordination. It requires us to think as one mind while maintaining our individual perspectives. The Nexus crystal can create that connection, but the bond is permanent. Once two consciousness touch through the crystal, they remain linked forever. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm not asking as your tactical partner or your wife of convenience. I'm asking as someone who's seen what happens if we fail, and what we might become if we succeed. Kelrin stared at the crystal, understanding the magnitude of what she was offering. Not just tactical coordination, but a joining of minds that would make them more than either could be alone. If we do this, he said slowly, There's no going back to our separate lives after the war. No, there isn't. He thought of the intelligence reports, the families on the colony worlds, the billions of lives hanging in the balance. Then he thought of the woman beside him, who had sacrificed everything to stand with humanity against the darkness. Show me how it works. Together, they placed their hands on the crystal. The moment their skin made contact with its surface, Kelrin felt his consciousness expand, touching something vast and warm and infinitely complex. He could feel Liralay's thoughts brushing against his own, her fears, her hopes, her absolute determination to save both their peoples. And beneath it all, something he hadn't expected, love. Not the convenient partnership they'd agreed to, but something deeper and more fundamental. She had been falling for him just as he had been falling for her. Both of them too caught up in duty and necessity to acknowledge what was growing between them. When the bonding was complete, they stood together in perfect understanding. They were still themselves, but they were also something new to minds that could think as one while maintaining their unique strengths. Outside the viewport, the stars seemed brighter. The hegemony fleet would arrive within the week. The hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts, their 3,000 ships blotting out the stars around the Kepler system. At their center, the 12-node vessels pulsed with bioluminescent neural networks, their living holes, directing the collective consciousness that turned individual ships into components of a single vast weapon. Kelrin stood on the bridge of the Defiant Echo, but his awareness extended far beyond his own ship. Through the Nexus bond, he could feel Liralay's presence aboard the Whisper of Tides, her prescient abilities flowing through their connection like water through his consciousness. He could sense the positioning of every ship in their combined fleet, feel the probability cascades that mapped out potential futures. All ships report ready, Lieutenant Commander Ferrix announced. Enemy fleet is assuming standard orbital bombardment formation, added Weapons Officer Velith. They're preparing to reduce Kepler Station and move on to the inner colonies. Kelrin closed his eyes, letting his awareness merge fully with Liralay's. Through her prescience, he could see the hegemony's tactical algorithms at work: probability matrices calculating optimal firing solutions, defensive positions, response patterns. The enemy expected them to fight conventionally, to mass their forces for a direct assault or defensive stand. They cannot see the path we will take. Liralay's thoughts whispered through their bond. Their collective mind cannot comprehend the chaos of individual intuition. Then let's show them what chaos looks like, Kelrin replied. All ships, he broadcast on the fleet frequency. Execute pattern Typhoon. 2 outside observers. The human and Altarian fleets began moving in complete madness. Ships scattered in apparently random directions, their courses following no discernible tactical logic. Some dove directly toward the most heavily defended sections of the hegemony formation. Others seemed to flee from optimal firing positions. Several appeared to be on collision courses with asteroids. But through the Nexus bond, Kelrin and Lir guided each vessel along paths that only they could perceive. His intuitive grasp of three-dimensional tactics found openings that shouldn't exist, while her prescient abilities ensured they were exactly where they needed to be when those openings appeared. The hegemony fleet began adjusting its formation, trying to respond to threats that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Their collective consciousness worked frantically to calculate new probability matrices, but every adjustment created new openings for ships that weren't where their algorithms predicted they should be. First node vessel within range, reported the tactical officer aboard Liralay's flagship. The Whisper of Tides materialized from what appeared to be empty space, having threaded through a gap between enemy ships that existed for exactly 12 seconds. Her weapons tore into the node vessel's living hull, disrupting the neural networks that coordinated an entire battle group. Immediately, 300 hegemony ships began operating independently, their movements becoming predictable and vulnerable. Second node, Kelrin announced. diving the Defiant Echo through a debris field that his gunners had created moments earlier by destroying an enemy cruiser. The node vessel tried to evade, but Lirelei had already seen where it would be. The battle became a dance of destruction. Each time they eliminated a node vessel, hundreds more enemy ships lost their collective coordination. What had been a perfectly orchestrated symphony of destruction became a cacophony of individual vessels trying to fight a battle they couldn't understand. But the cost was enormous. Human and Altarian ships were dying, their crews sacrificing themselves to create the openings that Kelrin and Lirelei needed. Each loss resonated through the Nexus bond, a note of grief that threatened to overwhelm their tactical focus. "Stay with me." Lirelei's thoughts provided an anchor of calm determination. "Their sacrifice has meaning only if we succeed." 8 nodes down. 4 remaining. The last 4 node vessels had clustered together at the center of their formation, surrounded by the heaviest concentration of defensive ships. The hegemony had finally adapted to their tactics, creating an impenetrable sphere of overlapping fire zones. "I can't see a path through that," Kelrin admitted, "through their bond. There are too many variables, too much firepower." "Then we don't go through it," Lirelei replied. "We go under it." She shared her Vizhuna course that took them beneath the plane of battle, using the system's asteroid belt as cover, emerging directly below the clustered node vessels where their defensive positioning assumed no threat could approach. "It's impossible," Kelrin breathed. "The navigation calculations alone. For anyone but us." Together, they began the most complex tactical maneuver in the history of warfare. Kelrin's intuitive understanding of three-dimensional space merged with Lirelei's prescient abilities to plot a course. Through the asteroid field that required split-second timing and perfect coordination between dozens of ships, the Defiant Echo and Whisper of Tides led the final assault group through a maze of tumbling rocks, their paths shifting constantly as Kelrin found new routes and Lirelei anticipated the precise timing needed for each course correction. They emerged from the asteroid field directly beneath the node vessels, so close that the enemy's sensors couldn't distinguish between ships and space debris until it was too late. For simultaneous strikes, for explosions that tore apart the living neural networks holding the hegemony fleet together in the space of minutes. 3,000 enemy ships became 3,000 individual vessels, each operating on basic survival programming. Without their collective consciousness to coordinate them, they were helpless against the combined tactical brilliance of human and Altarian forces. The Battle of Confluence was over, but as Kelrin and Lirelei stood together watching the enemy fleet retreat in disarray, they both knew that something far more significant had been won than a single battle. They had proven that individual consciousness, united by choice rather than compulsion, could achieve things that even the most sophisticated collective intelligence could not imagine. 6 months after the Battle of Confluence, Kelrin stood in the observation lounge of the newly commissioned deep space vessel Harmony's Edge, watching the construction of the first joint human-Altarian colony on the world they had named New Synthesis. The planet's twin suns cast everything in warm gold and silver light, making the growing city below look like something from a dream. "The integration protocols are exceeding all projections," Lirelei reported, settling beside him at the V. Even after all this time, the Nexus bond between them continued to strengthen, creating new layers of understanding and connection. Human engineering intuition combined with Altarian prescient planning. The city is designing itself. Through their shared consciousness, Kelrin could feel her wonder at what they were witnessing. The colony wasn't being built according to traditional human grid patterns or Altarian flowing organic designs. Instead, it was evolving into something entirely new, a synthesis that incorporated the best of both approaches while transcending the limitations of either. "The hegemony remnants are requesting another meeting," he said, sharing the communication they'd received that morning. "Their collective consciousness is ... adapting. Fragmenting," Lirelei corrected gently. "Individual nodes are beginning to operate independently, forming smaller collectives based on choice rather than compulsion. Some are even requesting asylum in human space. It was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of their victory. The hegemony's defeat hadn't just stopped their expansion, it had shattered the very concept that had held their civilization together. Across their former territory, individual consciousness was emerging like flowers after a long winter. Admiral Roxthane's latest dispatch confirms it. Kelrin continued. The Galactic Council is officially recognizing the Terran-Altarian Alliance as a full member state. We'll have a voice in interstellar governance for the first time, and a responsibility to use that voice wisely. Lyralay's hand found his, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. The other species are watching us, trying to understand how two such different peoples could achieve such perfect coordination. They're asking the wrong question, Kelrin realized. They want to know how we work together so well, but the real question is why. Through their bond, he felt her amusement and agreement. The secret wasn't in their tactical coordination, or even their prescient abilities. It was in the choice they had made to remain individuals, while becoming something greater together. The diplomatic delegations are still confused by our marriage, Lyralay observed. They understand political alliances and strategic partnerships, but they don't understand love. The word hung between them, as clear and simple as starlight. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had evolved into something that neither of their species had words for, a joining of souls that maintained individual identity while creating unprecedented unity. The Council of Navigation has officially pardoned my departure from Altarian space, Lyralay said quietly. They're calling it prescient wisdom rather than treason. I could return home if I wished. Kelrin turned from the viewport to look at her directly, though through their bond he already knew her answer. And, my home is wherever you are, she said simply. But more than that tower, home is wherever consciousness chooses cooperation over domination, wherever individuals unite while remaining themselves. Below them, the city of new synthesis pulsed with the light of thousands of lives choosing to build something unprecedented together. Human families worked alongside Altarian pods to design schools that could teach both species children. Engineers collaborated on transportation systems that incorporated both efficiency and beauty. Artists created works that neither species could have imagined alone. The deep space exploration protocols are ready for approval, Kelrin said, sharing the technical specifications through their bond. Joint crews, shared command structure, missions to investigate the anomalous signals from beyond the galactic rim. Unknown territories, Lyralay murmured, her prescient abilities already reaching toward those distant possibilities. I can see glimpses, other forms of consciousness, other ways of being, some welcoming, others, Others will face together, Kelrin finished. Whatever's out there, they'll encounter not just humans or Altarians, but something new, something that proves consciousness doesn't have to choose between individual freedom and unified purpose. Their first child moved restlessly in Lyralay's womb, fusion of human and Altarian genetics that the medical experts were still studying with wonder. Early scans suggested abilities that went beyond either parent species, enhanced intuition, coupled with prescient perception, individual creativity balanced by innate coordination. She'll grow up in a galaxy where cooperation across species isn't just possible, but natural, Lyralay said, her hand moving to her belly, where difference is strength rather than threat. The first of her kind, but not the last, Kelrin agreed. By the time she's old enough to command ships of her own, there will be dozens of allied species working together, each contributing their unique gifts to something greater than the sum of its parts. The communication console chimed with an incoming priority message. Admiral Roxthane's face appeared on the screen, her expression mixing excitement with concern. Commanders, We've received response signals from the deep galactic rim. Whatever's out there, they're aware of us now. The Exploration Council is requesting your immediate input on first contact protocols. Kelrin and Lirale exchanged a look that conveyed volumes through their bond. New challenges, new opportunities, new forms of consciousness to understand and possibly ally with the galaxy was vast, and they had only begun to explore what was possible when different species chose unity over domination. Tell the Council we'll be there within the week, Kelrin replied. And Admiral, make sure they understand we're not going out there as conquerors, or even as explorers. We're going as teachers. Teachers of what? That consciousness is not a zero-sum game, Lirale answered. That strength comes not from absorption or assimilation, but from chosen cooperation between free minds. As the communication ended, they stood together, watching their city grow beneath alien stars. Their child stirring in the womb, and somewhere beyond the edge of known space. New voices calling out across the cosmic dark. The marriage that had begun as mere convenience had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization, one built not on the dominance of the collective or the isolation of the individual, but on the conscious choice to remain themselves while becoming something unprecedented together. In the end, Kelrin reflected, that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not their technology or their tactical brilliance, but their stubborn insistence that love and free will were not contradictions, but complementary forces that could transform the very nature of existence itself. The stars were calling, and they would answer not as conquerors, but as gardeners planting seeds of possibility throughout the cosmos. Together,